Hello and welcome to this edition of FiTV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We're coming to you just a few blocks from Florida's capital. We are here with Steve Schale. He is a political strategist. He's the former Florida senior advisor to President Barack Obama. It's been in Time magazine. We all thought that was cool to see our friend in Time magazine advising the president that he was going to win the election. And now, Steve, you are playing a large role with Vice President Biden's campaign. Welcome to the show, first of all, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Hey, Brad, great to be on again. And yeah, my mom loved that Time magazine cover. Trust me, everybody we know got that thing, not cover, but it was a picture inside. Everybody got it for Christmas that one year. So this cycle, I'm running Unite the Country. We are a pro-Biden super PAC. We started back in late October of 2019 during the primary to help the VP get through the early states and Super Tuesday. And, since over the last 4 or 5 months now, we've been running mostly pro-Biden advertising, digital kind of campaigns, mostly in the upper Midwest. Though right now we've begun our first Florida investment, about $1.5 million investment in Miami this week.
Well, we hope you're buying, cable TV for some of those ads as well, of course, representing the cable industry. So we'll look for those on our feeds, but it's digital, so we get that too. Internet's just as good. So, all right. Well, let's start at the top. When you think of trends, what are you seeing at the national and on the Florida landscape as we head into November? I mean, political trends just in general. What are the big things you're seeing?
Yeah, Brad. I mean, so first of all, there's a fair amount of sort of connective tissue between Florida and the rest of the country. So some of these trends are kind of one and the same. For example, as you know, a lot of the swing voters in Florida tend to be older voters or college-educated, voters who live on the I-4 corridor, and a lot of those voters came from places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania. So, the things that are driving the election, for example, in the upper Midwest, which gets a lot of the attention, tend to be the same things that are driving the election now. And the key difference at this point in the cycle, granted there's still 7, 8, 9 weeks to go, hard to imagine, is the fact that Joe Biden, frankly, is just doing better with white voters in general. He's doing better with older white voters. He's doing better with women in general, doing better with college-educated voters in general. And that's really the primary reason why when you see for example, states like Pennsylvania, where Biden's in most polls up around 50, not above 50, whether he's up 5 or 9, like he tends to be around 50. Same thing in Michigan, Wisconsin. It's being driven by, here in Florida, by the fact that he's just frankly doing better with white voters across the table.
Well, so if those trends continue to hold, it'll be looking good for Steve Schale. So that's pretty neat. Let's talk about the elephant in the room of the entire world, really. But when we think of the COVID-19 pandemic, how is that impacting fundraising and campaigning? And do you think these changes are going to be here to stay? But let's talk about this campaign. How do you think it's affecting fundraising and campaigning right now?
Well, I mean, initially it had a pretty big impact. I mean, I just, put my Unite the Country hat on for a second. Brad, I traveled during session, you and I worked together some stuff. I mean, I traveled during session almost every week for a day or two. I'd leave to Tallahassee to go off and raise money someplace and come back. And I actually was supposed to be on the road like 13 of 16 work days, in mid-March. And obviously that ground to a complete halt. I've not been on the road since March, other than, to go see my parents or go see family. But, so it's uncharted territory for everybody right now. And you're seeing campaigns try to adapt. The Trump campaign is, kind of got people on the ground. The Biden campaign's gone more virtual. There are some progressive and conservative groups that are kind of doing a mix of things. Certainly on the candidate fundraising side, both the Biden and Trump campaigns are raising ridiculous amounts of money, showing that there's a lot of interest in the election. Yeah, I think some of the secondary groups like ours, it's been a little bit harder, in part because the campaigns are raising so much money. I mean, there is only so much money, and but again, I mean, a lot of ways it's a regular election. I mean, campaigns are still advertising on TV and still got organizers not going to making voter contacts, but we're all doing it from our living room, which is certainly like everybody, we're all adjusting.
Well, and I know a lot of the folks on both sides that are out doing literature drops at people's front door. They're doing it kind of at the fence line, at the mailbox, and talking to people at a distance. So I think people are still interacting and hearing the messages of both campaigns. But it's just interesting when you think about a strategy and an in-person contact, which usually makes a huge difference in those final votes. So thanks for sharing that with us.
I was going to say, just on the same way, it's just different for everybody. I mean, in 2008, we had like 75 offices. We had 100 offices in 2012. If you want to know what was going on, you just go to a field office for half a day. And so you as an operative, you kind of lose some of that touch that you would get just being able to really go talk to individual voters and staff. But again, campaigns are figuring it out.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, well, here's a big topic, and I really kind of want your deepest insights into this. You have known the Florida electorate for a very long time, and you've known it granularly, district to district, within each county. Give us your long format answer, if you would, for how has the electorate changed from 08 to 16 to today? I mean, give us kind of your sweep on where we sit today versus where we were back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about it demographically and then political trends, I mean, you have two things that are happening sort of side by side, one that should benefit Democrats and one that's benefiting Republicans that are balancing each other out. I mean, the state is getting more diverse. The percentage of the electorate among registered voters in 2008 was like 69 or 70% white. It's probably going to be 62, 63% white in terms of registered voters by the time the books close in October. Democrats, by and large, win among communities of color. The margin sort of ranges between communities, but it's a trend that should benefit Democrats. At the same time, Democrats have been struggling with white voters in Florida over the last few cycles. And Obama got 41% of the white vote in 2008, and Clinton got 32%, if you believe the exit polls, in 2016. And so that demographic shift, which a lot of folks predicted would lead to a more democratic state, has been counterbalanced by the fact that Republicans are doing better with, for example, non-educated, non-college educated white voters, blue collar retirees, et cetera. And so I think that the question of this election is going to come down to, is Joe Biden's strength among particularly working class blue collar white voters, college educated white women, appears to be a little better with seniors. Does that going to matter more with the fact that Trump seems to be doing a little bit better with Cubans and non-Cuban Hispanics? And I think that's going to be kind of the question over the next 7 or 8 weeks. But there's no reason for anybody to think Florida's not going to be another 2 or 3 point race. In 2008 we won by 2.7%. Now it's like a landslide compared to the last few.
Right. I mean, Florida is usually, we're getting by on our pennies when it comes to the or those single person vote districts.
Yeah.
And I know every one of those topics you just laid out, I'm sure will be highlighted in artful ways in the upcoming debates. Looking forward to seeing both candidates, and their vice presidential picks putting their best foot forward. Okay, so let's go to polling. In 2016, I think the takeaway was, those Trump voters weren't either answering phones or they weren't responding honestly because they just didn't want to tell anyone who they were voting for. Do you see that kind of trend, or what polling trends are you seeing this time?
Well, I think that there's two answers to that. I mean, first of all, the polling in the national averages and the polling in Florida was pretty spot on. I mean, the national averages had Hillary Clinton winning the national popular vote. I think the last Real Clear Politics average vote poll was like 3.1%. Well, she won it by like 2.6%. Here in Florida, the last average had Trump at a 0.6% win, and he won by 1.1. And so, I think some of this polling stuff has actually been a little bit overwrought. The problem is people find one poll and they're like, wow, that poll must be right. And what we know is that most public polling is done fairly cheaply. A lot of them have a lot of noise. For example, as the Hispanic population in Florida is exceptionally diverse. If you call 800 people in Florida, you're going to maybe call 150 Hispanics. If you get 10 more Cubans than you're supposed to, it's going to look really Republican. If you get 10 more Puerto Ricans, it's going to look really Democratic. And so, but I think the averages kind of balance themselves out. And so I actually don't think this sort of conspiracy theory that some folks have is borne out by at least the data in Florida and nationally. So I think the other thing that's really a difference this cycle is Hillary Clinton was never that close to 50% in a lot of polls. 2000 and take Florida, she never was above 48% in a single public poll in Florida. So there was always room for Trump to grow. I think the challenge Trump has perfectly honest, like he's under 50. I mean, the challenger Biden's above 50 in most public polling, in most battleground states, in most national polls. And Trump's very disapproval rating among voters in those states is often above 50. And so, it's a different challenge than 4 years ago, where you saw a lot of polls that hit 8, 10, 12% undecided. You just don't have that this time. Doesn't mean Trump can't win, but I just think it's a little bit different kind of scenario than we had 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at favorables and unfavorable rankings, and you're a civilian, you're like, well, is it a zero-sum game? But you can have, favorable and unfaves that are all above 50% per candidate, and it just depends on how you're looking at the data and asking the question. Let me ask you about just real quick. We're down to our last probably 90 seconds here. Let me ask you real quick. How do you view the impact of Biden and the Democratic Party turnout in Florida? How do you think that'll buttress state level candidates in the House and the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's in a post-COVID world. It's we're kind of learning as we go along. I mean, there's an argument that there may be less sort of ticket splitters this time because, again, your state House candidates oftentimes make their living banging on doors, and you may not have the same kind of effort. In the end, I think we see places of the state where there tends to be a lot of straight party voting. There are places where there's not. Miami-Dade, for example, we've seen over the years that there are sometimes there's 30-point differences between the top of the ticket and the bottom of the ticket. So I think it just depends, and I think as I tell anybody who asks my opinion about state House races, if you're running, just go out there and talk to your own base, talk to swing voters, and just kind of pound away. You can't control what you can't control. You can't control the top of the ticket, but
always. Yeah. All right. Well, Steve, as always, Steve Schale, well known nationally for your acumen and ability to build strategies and win races and be that key voice in the air. We really appreciate you coming on. That's all the time we have for today's episode of FiTV. For more great interviews like this one, make sure you hit us up on our social media feeds. And for today, thanks for tuning in.